Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us today. We're super excited to have you and to tell another story of one of our alums who's successfully transitioned into the cybersecurity industry. My name is Colleen Bradley. I'm the host of these webinars, and I am the Senior Associate of Academy Operations here at Evolve Academy. And I'm joined today with Kyle, one of our alums, to talk about his transition into cybersecurity. Thank you so much for being with us today, Kyle.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. So before we, get into the nitty-gritty of like how you transition, I would love to just let's start at the beginning, talk about what you were doing before cybersecurity so that people who aren't in the industry at all can realize like, oh, I can join the industry too and not have anything to have done with it before. So if you could talk a little bit about what you were doing before, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, so before I transitioned to cybersecurity, I was a police officer for a local department here in Tennessee. And before that, I did a whole lot of different things after my time in the Air Force. But my most recent career path was law enforcement.
Awesome. And then that was before you were in the Air Force or after? Like when did that lie in the timeline?
That was after. So
Okay.
after I left the military, I did a couple of different things. I wanted to be a mechanic for a little bit, and then I decided that I wanted to do law enforcement. And then once I decided I didn't want to do law enforcement anymore, I reached out to a couple of good friends of mine, and they kind of convinced me to follow the path that they had thought that I was interested in the entire time that they've known me. So I decided to pull the trigger and get really interested and kind of just go full bore into learning cybersecurity and kind of getting into the whole group of people that are interested in cybersecurity. They're infosec Twitter and infosec, like everybody that I ended up meeting was very supportive and everything like that. So that's kind of how I ended up getting into it. But yeah, before that I was a police officer, and then I drove parts for a little bit for an automotive company. But yeah.
So you said you talked to some people and that's how you kind of got into this path. But what was it specifically about cybersecurity that drew you to it? And why were you like, yeah, this is the path that I want to go down?
So I think I was always supposed to go down this path. I just chose a really weird way of getting into it. When I was in the military, I did like security. So it kind of, I was able to kind of make that transition a little smoother. But when I was younger, I was really interested in like the movie Hackers, and there's a book called Hackers, and it's about the some MIT folk from like the 60s that were working on like the railroad. They had like a model railroad club, and they're like the first hackers. And I think the mentality of what a hacker is kind of was something that interested me. They were very curious, and they all seemed really supportive of each other. And yeah, that was just kind of what interested me in cybersecurity in the first place. And then realizing what goes into actually learning how to do cybersecurity and learning how to do all the cool like hacker things, all of those like kind of bolstered my interest. And because there's so much to learn, it kind of was able to be something that I spend my weekends doing, or I'll spend like I went to DEF CON this past August, and the last year I went to DEF CON, and those kind of things really like help me to stay motivated. So I think, I've always been interested in cybersecurity, but then there's like little things in my life that made me consider going into it as a job.
And so what do you do in cybersecurity right now? We'll talk about the transition, but if you could talk about like where you are right now and what you're doing, and then we'll talk about how you got there.
Yeah, so what I do right now, my job title is a cyber vulnerability research analyst, and it's an interesting job. My day-to-day is very varied in that, well, so a day in the life would typically be I'll have a conversation with the client, with my team, and we'll go over the product that we're working on for the month or the quarter. And what that entails is we'll discuss timelines and kind of scope it out. And then once that's complete, we'll just kind of go into analyzing the data of certain vulnerability scans And then we'll also couple that with open source research and then try to tell a compelling story for our critical infrastructure that we're working on. So essentially, we'll do vulnerability assessments or vulnerability products or reports, really, kind of detailing the risk that the critical infrastructure that we're working on is showing.
You talked about compelling storytelling. I feel like that's not something that people think about all the time when they think cybersecurity. Do you mind elaborating on that a little bit?
Sure. So when we talk about compelling story, we want to not be so, I guess, focused on the vulnerabilities, but we want to talk about why those vulnerabilities are important in certain infrastructures. So we want to, I think, what we focus on is the bottom line up front and kind of getting that story out there because what we write to typically are C-level executives and those that might not be so technical. So in order to make it a little more readable, I think that's something that we have to work on in terms of making that story compelling for the reader in order to get them to buy into what we're going to be telling them later on in the document.
So it's not just the technical skills that are important, it's the ability to like communicate and explain to people that might not understand it the way that you guys do, who are down in the in the trenches doing the work.
Exactly.
So you talk about going from law enforcement and the Air Force to cybersecurity, but how do you bridge that? Like, how are you learning the skills to be able to get to working in the industry itself? I want to dive deeper into this because I feel like a lot of people who are transitioning are wondering the same thing. So you went to Evolve, obviously. Where was that in your journey, and how did you decide, yeah, I want to pursue a boot camp?
Yeah. So the where Evolve kind of came into play was it was literally 2 weeks after I had resigned from the police department. I just went on Google and looked up cybersecurity boot camps because I knew it was something that I wanted to do. I also had VA benefits that I was able to utilize to help me along. But that's kind of why I chose Evolve. And they had I'm not sure if it still goes on, but there's a 2 week preparatory course that gives you kind of enough knowledge to kind of understand what's going on as soon as you start. So I had no knowledge prior to. I did a little bit of programming when I was in high school, but that was about it. And everything that I've learned before the academy was through that preparatory course. So, going from law enforcement with no real technical background, I mean, I had some, office suite experience, but that was about it. I had not touched Linux, I had not touched, any cool tools or anything like that. So,
Yeah, and Dr. Faisal just put in a link to the course that Kyle's talking about. So if you want to go check that out, you can. And like Kyle said, you don't have to have any experience to join the cybersecurity industry. You can do it and find your path. And speaking of finding your path, there's so many areas that you can go into in cybersecurity. It's this huge overarching umbrella. So how did you decide that you want to go down the path that you went down, specifically in like working with vulnerabilities now?
yeah. So, I think the path that I've chosen, it's kind of interesting because I'm still figuring out where I want to be, right? I am currently studying to learn more about penetration testing because that's what I want to do in the future. And I think when you first start, there's so many different options that are out there, and it's a little bit daunting, I think, for some people to kind of pick something and stick with it. But I think going through Evolve, some of the courses there give you enough of like a hands-on experience to understand like, oh, I'm really interested in blue teaming or I'm really interested in red teaming. You get the exposure to a lot of different things. And I think that's one of the best ways to figure out, where you want to continue down, certain paths. And while I was in Evolve, I also did a lot of different studying on my own through a couple of different, I had like done Try Hack Me and done a couple of CTF courses or CTF, competitions. So I think I was really able to kind of hone in on what I enjoyed doing. and then just kind of researched all of that kind of stuff. And yeah, that's kind of how I honed in on what I wanted to do.
Putting in that extra work, I mean, that's important. You're going to get in, you're going to get what you put in. So that's great advice
Absolutely.
for everyone. And another big part of transitioning into the cybersecurity industry is the job search. And I think that's something that's extremely daunting to a lot of people, especially those who don't have prior experience. So could you talk a little bit about your job search, how that went, and any tips and tricks that you would like to share with everyone?
Yeah, so luckily, prior to starting my job search, I think immediately after enrolling in Evolve, I started my LinkedIn account and began to just kind of add everyone in my cohort. And then I started to add as many people as I could that were in positions that I wanted to be in. And it added recruiters and friends and all sorts of people. I really wanted to make my LinkedIn something that I could provide value to. Like I can add things I think are interesting or I think are useful, and then get value from, because my connections enabled me to interview for the position that I have now. So I had a friend of mine who I worked with in the military, who was a connection that it eventually brought it up to the hiring manager, and I ended up getting an interview from there. A lot of things that I did before I started to heavily search for a position was, because I didn't have any experience, I went through a lot of Try Hack Me, Capture the Flags, and I started a blog. I blogged about beginning in cybersecurity. So I blogged about kind of like my story. And then I started to do write-ups just to add value and to be, I guess, involved in the InfoSec community. I think that's very important, especially to show that you're involved and you're constantly learning. I think that's something that people look for, is, on your off time, that you're interested in cybersecurity still, and you're continuously improving and doing stuff like that.
The blog thing is really cool. I think that's a great way and a great unique way to really develop your skills and hone them in a little bit more. And we did have a question come in. What was your certification journey like? Do you like what certifications do you recommend? Anything outside of Security Plus? Do you need certs? What's your opinion on that?
So I don't actually have I only have a high school diploma. I haven't gone to college, and I think certifications in that case are pretty important. They at least give hiring managers an idea of your skill set. Personally, I only have the Security Plus as of right now. I'm working on a couple of certifications currently, but I think for myself, I got enough of the prerequisite knowledge of like networking and how like computers work just through studying on my own. I don't. I think for some people, the like A plus and Network plus may be something that they would benefit strongly from, especially since there's a lot of jobs in cybersecurity that require or knowledge heavily in those. And I think some people may just gain a little bit more from doing those prerequisite certifications prior to. But yeah, I only have the Security Plus right now, and I'm working on getting a couple more.
That's awesome. I think that's really refreshing for people who didn't go to college and they can get a job in cybersecurity. Like you put in the work, you can do it. And so we also got another question that came in here. You talked a little bit about how working with the Air Force helped you with your network and get to the job that you have now. But is there anything else from the Air Force that helped you, whether that's a skill that you learned while you were there that applies to your job now, or anything else that helped you land your role?
Yeah, so the way that I kind of discuss my Air Force career in terms of cybersecurity, so I did a lot of security in the Air Force. That was my job. So I'm able to relate a lot of the topics that they discuss in cybersecurity with my military experience. And I think that people in any sort of job can relate their job to a lot of topics in cybersecurity. They're, just going to be a little creative, I guess. And yeah, I think that's important when you're interviewing, is to try to relate your past experience with the job post and the questions that they ask. because I think that's just easier to kind of gauge experience and to gauge your understanding of the questions that they're asking. So that's my advice, is to just kind of try to figure out what in your life can relate to those skills. And I think you'll be good to go.
I completely agree. I think there's so much that you can relate from other experiences in your life to a role that you're looking for, whether that's a technical skill or just like a soft skill, something that you can pull from any experience that you've had. Oh yeah, we got a well said from you, so that's awesome. If you could talk a little bit about, so I mean, it's not going to be always be the easiest journey transitioning into the cybersecurity industry. I'd love if you could just talk about like something, a challenge that you experienced, and how you worked through that, so that if someone's going through the same thing as you, they're able to reference, your advice and be able to apply it as well.
Yeah. So challenges that I experienced when I resigned from the police department, we had just bought a house and I was kind of the sole earner for the family. So the challenge was, I mean, it really does kind of lit a fire under me to learn as much as I could and to gain as much experience as I could to kind of get in the door faster. Some other challenges were in my current position, I'm a consultant, and transitioning from being in the military and kind of just doing what you're told to kind of being in the client's ear, asking them if that's something that they actually want, or recommending something that might be better for them. That was a big challenge for me to kind of wrap my hand around and to get the confidence in order to be able to do that. But I think that was my biggest challenge in getting into cybersecurity.
That's so interesting. I'm learning everything as everyone in the audience is as well. I think that's a very interesting perspective to have, and um, something that you can overcome it, even though it's completely two different experiences that you've had. So that's great. And a little bit more on the positive note, what is something that you love about the cybersecurity industry, whether that's specifically about your job or about the industry as a whole? Like, why should someone even try to get into the industry?
So, I mean, I obviously think cybersecurity is awesome. I think it's very interesting just in terms of like all of the different vulnerabilities that are out there. It's always changing, so you have to keep your finger on the pulse really to stay up to date. And I think it's never really stale. There's always something new to talk about. What I really love is my team. The team that I work with is awesome. I think that really makes the job really, and everybody's really smart. Everyone's smarter than me, so that's just kind of that's why I love it.
Something that I'm curious about, because I think everyone, no matter the industry, deals with this. Do you deal with imposter syndrome? And if you don't, do you have any tips for people, that do deal with it? Something that I think people, especially that don't have experience before and are in their role for the first time, probably struggle with. Is this? Do you have anything that can help ease that struggle a little bit?
Oh yeah, I deal with imposter syndrome all the time, pretty much every day.
Yeah.
Um, I think what you need to remember is once you've gotten into the position, you were hired for a reason. The hiring manager and your coworkers saw something in you that if you don't see it in yourself, it's there. Always be learning. That kind of will give you the confidence to feel that you belong. Continue to pursue certifications, and I think the more experience you get, the less the imposter syndrome comes back. But I think it'll happen regardless. Just remember why you're there and that you were there for a reason.
I like what you said about how, the hiring manager chose you for a reason, and to stick with that. Um, so, kind of like our final question here before we have to head out, is there any final advice that you have for people looking to get into the industry? I know that you've talked about all the extra work that you put in, the CTFs that you participated in. Is there anything else that you think you would love to share with people who are trying to get into this industry?
Yeah. So final advice, I think reach out to people and like comment and just be active in the community. Put yourself out there. I know, I'm not the most extroverted person, and I try to make as many posts as I can, and just kind of be active in the community. The more people see your face, or the more that people see your name, the more interactions you'll get, And I think that's a little bit easier in terms of trying to find a position and making friends, even, and gaining that support system and people to go to for questions and people to go to for, I'm working on something, I need some assistance. If I ask a question like that to my LinkedIn, to my Twitter, I'll get, 1,000 comments saying, here's how you do this or something like that. But
That's awesome. That's great advice. And Kyla, I've really enjoyed talking to you today. I've honestly learned a lot. It's been a pleasure, and I want to thank our audience for being here today. Thank you for the questions. We've really enjoyed sharing Kyle's story with you.
thank you for having me. Appreciate it.